Good afternoon, everybody. This is Chip Schwarzy, from the Chamber of Commerce here in Idaho Falls. We're so pleased to have you join us for our online lunch today. On behalf of the Greater Idaho Falls Chamber of Commerce, the City Club, the Rotary Club here in Idaho Falls, and the Civitan Club, it's our pleasure to have with us today Governor Brad Little to discuss with us some of the things regarding the COVID-19 virus, its impact on businesses, and what we can look forward to. We hope that you're online. If you're online with us, we encourage you to share this because we want as many people to get as much information. In just a second, I'm going to turn the time over to the governor. We've asked him here today to share with us a little bit about what coming out of a stay-at-home order looks like. What's going to happen on May 1st, what businesses can come out. We're going to ask him, or we've asked him to talk a little bit about maybe some of us have had to lay folks off and unemployment insurance and the things that have come through the federal government there, to share an update on where we're at with that, because we understand income. A lot of our employers are really worried about their employees maintaining an income through this tough time. And we're going to have him share just about everything and anything that he can think of regarding this COVID-19 virus, its impact on our economy here in eastern Idaho. So at this time, I want to flip the mic over to Governor Brad Little. Governor Little, thank you so much for being with us here today, and we'll give you the time, as much time as you need. If you folks have questions, make sure you put them in the chat line. Those questions will come up to us, and we'll be able to submit them to the governor. Governor?
Well, thank you, Chip, and everybody on the lunch call. I'm getting a little more used to this. Rather than traveling around, and which I would much prefer would be to be in your community and look you in the eye and shake your hand and have a conversation. But that's not the hand that we've been dealt. As you all know, those of you that have paid any attention to what I've said in the last year and almost a half now, is that the economic prosperity of us and our children is my number one priority. It's still my number one priority, but people can't be prosperous if they either A, are not safe, or B, they don't think they're safe. And that's where consumer confidence in institutions are so important. Because if they have confidence, then good things will happen. 90 days ago, the confidence rating in Idaho was one of the highest in the nation. Confidence in institutions, confidence in that we're doing the right thing. What a difference the last, particularly 70 days have made. We started watching the COVID-19, our team, our epidemiological team, and my Department of Health and Welfare, the health districts in January. Some of the things we stood up very early before we even had confirmed cases. Because of its prevalence in both Washington and then California, we started standing up what we needed. My first emergency order was early on, and that put into effect our Idaho Office of Emergency Management, and where all of those people aggregate together to make sure that we've got enough capacity in whatever that may be. Obviously, personal protection equipment is a big part of that, and I'd be glad to address that going forward. But economic prosperity is what our goal is. As I stated, I was just on a call with most of the governors, National Governors Association. Governor Herbert was the last one to talk. He's talking about they've got Utah's got a green, orange, a red, orange, something color green opening. Tomorrow we're going to announce 4 phases of our opening. I wasn't creative enough to put colors on it, but I should have learned from my friend Gary Herbert. But we're going to announce the different phases of that. We just as we did from the very get-go, we've been following the Center for Disease Control guidance, and the gate that we need to get through. The president last Friday rolled out the opening of America. Matter of fact, it's my iPad's on top of my notebook, so I'd have to move the iPad to get to it because it's right on top of my desk. But there is not a lot of daylight between the direction from the administration where we are. But some of the gates that we have to get through is better testing and better tracing. And just like all the other states, just like the call I was just on with the other governors, nobody has enough tracing and testing to have a real high level of confidence everywhere in their state. Our testing in Blaine County is pretty high, but of course we had the first case of community spread, and as you're all aware, Blaine County was one of the most infected communities in the whole United States at one point in time. But we've had good luck there. Fortunately, in Blaine County, they've got a good hospital that's got affiliations with other hospitals. So when things got bad, they had the capacity to go forward. We are having to make a lot of decisions. Some of them are basically the best of some not good choices. That's what this job entails at this point in time. That's the conversation I have with my fellow governors is what do you do today that sets you up for success in the future? If we don't do this right and we have a second wave and we overrun our healthcare capacity, and right now we don't think it's PPE, we think it's personnel. It's not hospital beds. It's not ventilators. It's personnel. And of course, I also have to have that personnel to do a lot of the testing. We're hopeful that there's some new tests that are going to come on. They're going to require less personal protection equipment and less personnel. And that opens up capacity to do other things. But if things go well, we're going to have a 4-phase opening. Obviously, it will start, and even the order I did last week, we opened up some more businesses that we had before. But you need to remember, we had businesses open in Idaho from the very get-go that were closed in a lot of other states because we weren't as far along and didn't have as much community spread as, say, Washington or California, and particularly the dense East Coast states. So we started off ahead of a lot of the other states. They're making great pronouncements about some of the things they're opening that are things that we've had open all along. That doesn't do you any good if you're one of the businesses. You've got a family member or friend that's affiliated with one of the businesses that's closed. But I can't emphasize enough how important confidence is given a crisis like this. That the community has confidence. Decisions are being made based on what they believe and science tells them is going to happen next. Because if we wouldn't have done anything, which there's no state that didn't do anything, but if we had not have done anything, if we'd have had the no action alternative, it would have been very, very, very bad here. It's still not good. We've still got some areas where there's community spread. We've got areas where the medical community says they think they've got community spread, but they don't have enough testing capacity to reach out to it. So that's where we are. We are going to, I hope to have some time this afternoon to put the finishing touches on our 4-phase plan that we're going to release tomorrow at 11 o'clock. So Chip, with that, let me talk about a couple of the other points you talked about here. The state's role in the CARES Act. The state of Idaho got 1.2 billion, 1.25 billion. It sounds like a lot to a guy from Emmett. They came into the state of Idaho, and we put together a committee. There's some legislative leadership. There's some of the agencies, there's cities, there's counties are all represented on it, but we still had it small enough to where they could function. we're still waiting for guidance. I will tell you that what we think we ought to do with that money is different than a lot of other states. Some of these other states, some of these other municipalities are already broke and they just want to backfill the hole that they have. We are very blessed in Idaho because of the prudent actions that our predecessors have taken, as far as having a rainy day fund, as far as having a balanced budget, as far as having a pension fund that was perfectly funded, almost 100% until this wreck happened, as far as having an unemployment trust fund that is probably in the top decile of all the states. But that doesn't mean it may run out of money. So part of that 1.2 billion is going to go, the original language from Congress said, for COVID related expenses, but not to backfill revenue holes. All the other states want to change that, and I think Congress may give more flexibility. But we want that to go to counties and cities and into the infrastructure to take care of some of the problems and some of the shortfalls. One of the areas that you're all familiar with that we have a deficiency in Idaho is broadband in part of the state. And so we're, I think the committee is going to recommend that we dedicate part of that money to communities where, whether it's their students trying to do online education or businesses or businesses that want their workforce to work from home, will deploy some of that money there. There's CARES 2.0 and 3.0 that are on their way. I will just tell you, in all of those, when I listen to these other governors, I believe we're in as good a shape as any. I'm a bit of an outlier. Well, I'll be blunt with you and tell you about the conversation we had. A lot of the states were just saying they wanted $500 billion to backfill spending in states. And I said, you know, if you took 10 or 20% of that money, which again sounds like a lot to me, and funded a Manhattan type project for what we need to do in research and development for both the vaccine and for therapeutics, we'd be taking care of the cause and not addressing the symptom. I got some sympathy from our congressional delegation, a little bit for the White House. I still keep asking for that. If we get the money in Idaho, we'll get it, and as prudent as we can, we'll put it out. But if the federal government's going to put our grandkids in debt, my hope is that we do something about the cause of this, and that's either good therapeutics, better diagnostics, and most importantly, a vaccine. Because if we have a good treatment or a good vaccine, then we can go back to where we were 80 days ago, and that's my sincere wish. One of the other questions, chances of the virus returning this fall. I have one of my notes is all the things that we don't know about the COVID virus. We don't know how it reacts in ultraviolet light. Because of some of the input we've had, actually, the Idaho Falls-based company, Idaho Steel, their subsidiary in Caldwell, one of their employees, who's a family friend of mine, reached out to me, and they deploy ultraviolet light in food processing plants. And as a result, they are putting together ultraviolet light filters for our assisted living centers. And we think ultraviolet light is going to be helpful in how we treat PPE and in a lot of other areas. But that goes to the list of things we don't know about the COVID virus. What's the incubation period? We're learning more and more about that every day. How long is the immunity? You hear a lot about the antibody test and about serology. If I get exposed to it, I take a blood test. Of course, it only is good after I get so far along. If I've just been exposed to it, the antibodies don't show up in my blood, so that test is not a total panacea. But when I get the blood test, will I have an immunity? But what we don't know is how long that immunity is and what's the breadth and the width of that immunity. If I had a asymptomatic case, do I have full immunity? If I had a very severe case, do I have more antibodies and will they last longer? Those are all things that that we need to learn about as we go forward. So the answer about a rerun in the fall, we know it hasn't acted like the flu everywhere, but we all know the flu season in Idaho starts in September, October, November. That's when we're all recommended to get our flu shots. And, some of the epidemiologists say we believe it'll get worse, so that the things we do now, if we're not very careful, we might have to, if we go all the way to phase 4 and have almost everything wide open, well, we have to go back to 3 or 2. I definitely don't want to do that. One of my number one priorities besides the economy is getting kids back to school. So, Chip, I think that's most of the questions that were submitted, and I'll be glad to answer some questions.
Because I know a lot of folks have laid folks off, and there's been the promise of the additional $600 from the federal government, and we know it's been delayed. Can you give us an update on where we're on that with the State Department of Labor?
Well, Chip, we're on it. Just all the governors I was just on a call with, the common refrain was Governor Ige from Hawaii and the governor from New Mexico. Look at our Department of Labor. You all, when you're having your meetings, and I know I was around, the biggest complaint was, where are we going to find any help? So they went from being a service to try and help the people that are on this call find employees to, in a matter of a week or two, getting absolutely besieged with just our traditional unemployment, little alone our traditional unemployment with the $600 on top, and little alone with 2 other programs. We just had a call with all the legislators a little bit ago. Director Revere said she's doing overtime. She's hiring new people. She's training new people. I'm on the Board of Examiners. Yesterday in our meeting, we okayed a significant increase in overtime for the Department of Labor. But that $600 program and some of the other programs require software changes. We haven't got all the input from the federal government. Is it going as fast as I want? Absolutely not. Do I know of anything that we could do physically to go faster? No, and I don't believe any other states. So be patient. Remember, some of that money is post-dated. So even if they haven't got the check yet, they'll get a bigger check later. So the rest of my add-on to that question is businesses, utilities, landlords, a little bit of patience should help, because that money should be coming into these people that were most seriously affected.
Great. Thank you, Governor. Just to let you know, I had a conversation with Connie Morgan this morning here in the Eastern Idaho office in Idaho Falls of the Department of Labor. Please express to your staff our appreciation for all the work they're doing. Those people are just running their tails off right now. You shared something. You shared with us what Idaho Steel and their subsidiaries doing. Yesterday, you shared a little bit about what the INL is doing with some research regarding helping our first responders with their PPE and sanitizing them. You want to share with our audience what you told us?
Yeah, one of the parts of this is because kind of under the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the states, the governors have been the front line of all this issue. So we have multiple, I was just on with all the governors, but then some regional and some other governors' calls. And it was on one of those calls when Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio talked about a machine, a piece of new equipment that would sanitize 80,000 N95 masks a day. And I was listening to the call, and he said the name of the company is Battelle. and a light went on, obviously, for me, given the enormous presence of Battelle in your community, about Battelle's presence here. So I did a little research on it, and then I was on a phone call with the regional FEMA administrator, and I think there's 20 of these machines. If I don't hold me to that number, but there's not 50 of them. I think there might be 16 or something. So I asked for Idaho if we could get one of the Battelle machines, and they kind of said yes. And then, as often is the case in the federal government, they looked at some map and said, well, it ought to be in Boise. That's where your population is. I said, no, it ought to be in Idaho Falls because of the relationship between the manufacturer and all the professionals at the lab. And besides that, at Idaho Falls, I can reach out to Mark Gordon in Wyoming and Steve Bullock in Montana and Gary Herbert in Utah, and we can use that machine at full capacity. And besides that, the lab has a national role, and it would be good for the lab. It would be good for those other states and be good for the state of Idaho. We ran that back up and down the flagpole, and finally, I think it's on its way. I think it said it's a big piece of equipment. The people out at the lab, Director Peters and his crew, have already got a place for it, and we look forward to getting it up and going. My concern is there's a lot of N95 manufacturing capacity coming on. What happens if you're in a hospital? I take my N95 mask off and write Brad on it, and put it in a box, and it'll be freighted down to Idaho Falls. They'll put it in this machine and zap it with whatever they zap it with, and then they'll send it back to Brad, and I think they can do this like 30 or 40 times. But as a business person, I go, the friction cost of the freight and all the other things, at some point in time, if there's new N95 masks and they're available at 70 cents a piece, that doesn't work. But that's why I love having it at the lab and having it be a Battelle machine, because if there get to be plenty of N95 masks around, maybe the lab can use it for other purposes because of their good relationships. So I was delighted that we were one of, I think, only 12 or 16 states got one of these machines.
Well, we're tickled pink that you thought of Eastern Idaho, Governor. Thank you for doing that. Got a couple of questions for you from our audience. Can you share with us a little bit about your plans or your thoughts regarding the opening of salons and gyms and similar businesses that I know a lot of us have dogs that need to be groomed? Can you give us a little input on that?
Well, they are on the list of things, and believe me, the salon owners are organized. And they go, why are we different than a jewelry store? I said, well, the jeweler doesn't necessarily lean over the top of you and breathe on you. I said that in jest, which was really a big mistake at the point in time when I did it. But as we progress, and we are making progress, they will be on the next list of given recommendations. Of course, people that are regulated by the Board of Cosmetology, which salons and barbers are, already have standards that they have to comply with. They're trained and they're inspected to make sure that the tools they use to do their trade are clean. And so now we'll expect them to use best practices along with that as we go forward. The reason, excuse me, allergies, don't be worried. The reason they were on the list to begin with is because we didn't know the magnitude of spread, and because we still don't have enough testing, we don't. But that's why they're in the phases that are going to be identified going forward. I look at where it is. We're going to do some work on that this afternoon, but we're going to release it. But the release tomorrow that we're going to do at 11 o'clock is basically a kind of it's a roadmap given hurdles that we have to get over about more testing, more surveillance as we move up that. And that's the guidance we were given from the White House in CDC. Then they'll be opening. Probably at the end of the line are big events and particularly indoor events like an indoor theater. They're probably at the end. I would think outdoor events. I would think a Chuckers game with spacing might be earlier than a great big outdoor concert where people are elbow to elbow. But that's me looking at it from what I know about the science so far, and we'll be releasing that tomorrow. But probably not with that specificity until we get closer to the dates.
Great. One of our questions from the audience was, where can they go tomorrow to find this reopening announcement? Are you going to be posting it somewhere? Are you going to?
Oh, we'll be streaming it however we do. We've done WebEx, we've done Zoom. It'll be if you go to my website, there'll be a place there.
Perfect. And I'm sure all of our sponsors today, the Chamber, the City Club, the Rotary, and Civitan, will track that information down and get it out as well. Another question from the audience. We know our hospitals have been impacted pretty negatively on this. They've canceled all their elective surgeries. And for some of us, having a knee replacement really isn't an elective surgery. What are your thoughts regarding starting some of those surgeries up to get our healthcare professionals back to work?
Well, Chip, unlike other states, we didn't mandate that elective surgery be canceled. That was kind of the collective thoughts of the hospitals, the primary care, the surgery centers, because we were all terrified of our shortage of PPE. They did it, and believe me, we've got some of these hospitals that are on the verge of going out of business, and some of these very specialized surgery centers are closed down. Of course, they're going to get some of the SBA money to backfill that, and this bill that just passed, I think it passed last night, it's got some more money going into the hospital. But I think I was told yesterday, I think Matt Hunter told me yesterday that there's some elective surgeries been going on in Port Enough all along. But as we build up our PPE inventory, I've been a big advocate for it because of the solvency of my critical access hospitals. Some of the smaller critical access hospitals have no ICU capacity anyway. So I don't want them to go broke and go out of business in those areas. So we are in constant communication with the hospital. Brian Whitlock, that represents the state hospital associations on our coronavirus working group, and we anticipate the hospitals collectively deciding a certain class of surgery at a certain time, particularly if it's not overnight, particularly if it doesn't consume a lot of PPE being open. Governor Herbert just, like I said, 15 minutes ago, said they're going to start opening up some elective surgery in Utah.
Great. Can you give us a status update? How comfortable are you with the PPE supplies in our state and the coming availability of PPE supplies?
Well, I went out to the warehouse last week, and Brad Ritchie, who runs our Idaho Office of Emergency Management, that's in part of his shop. From a high level basis, when we started this process, and originally the vice president was handled it, and then he turned it over to FEMA. What we heard from HHS is we're one of the only states where we have an aggregated inventory of our PPE at our hospitals, at our assisted living centers, at the Bonneville County Sheriff, at the Idaho Falls Fire Department. Now, all the reporting is not perfect, but a lot of states have modeled off of what we have in Idaho, our collective inventory, that spreadsheet we have. I was in there at the emergency center, and there were texts and emails coming in from little rural fire departments saying, now that we go out on a run, we had a few N95 masks, Now we need more, so we had to get it out. We think right now, with what we've got from the federal inventory and what we purchased, we got about a 2-week supply. Every day that goes by that we don't have a spike up in numbers, we're better off because we've got some more coming in. But at the same time, everybody that's doing testing is consuming PPE. That's why I'm excited about this Battelle machine that's coming into Idaho Falls. And then there's a lot of manufacturing capacity for gowns, for shields, for N95s that's coming on. Our whole issue when we did the original order was not to overrun our capacity, whether it be beds, staff, or PPE. And right now we're okay. I'm still worried about personnel. We've had 200 healthcare workers in Idaho that have been afflicted. Now some of them are coming back online with the COVID virus.
Great. One other question that's come through for us, and it's probably going to come out in your announcements tomorrow, but I'm going to ask it anyway because somebody asked me to ask it. Are you considering opening city by city or county by county and leaving that to a local decision?
Well, that was another issue that came up on the call with the governors. And it was interesting because you're a little, the Idaho Falls area is a little different, particularly if you did it countywide. But you can imagine if you change the restrictions in Ammon and didn't do it in Idaho Falls or vice versa. That's the problem with that. The first or the second city to do a stay home order was Boise. And what happened in Boise is all the behavior you were trying to discourage went across the street into Garden City. So that's part of the issue. We're getting a lot of it in North Idaho, where they've got all the parks, they've got all the marinas, they've got all the waterways closed down. And last weekend in Coeur d'Alene, the Kootenai County Sheriff was putting warning stickers on all the Washington cars that had gone to enjoy Lake Coeur d'Alene. So, we're in constant consultation with the health districts, and the health districts are going to have a bigger workload going forward because as we open up, particularly restaurants, they already do the food inspection. They're going to be, they're not going to be health district cops, but there's going to be health district consultants there helping the restaurants in what they need to do to maintain a much higher level of social distancing and sanitary conditions as we open. We continue to look at that. All the governors are talking about it. One of the big issues, Clark County would be a good example. Next to you, last time I checked, there wasn't a case at Clark County, but they don't have a hospital. If they have a problem in Clark County, where do you think their patients are going to go? So the islands that we have now are the state lines, and the jurisdiction that we have there, we have not ruled it out, and there's some point in time we may add it, but there's some real practicality issues to be addressed.
Great. Thank you so much. I guess for a final question, you're a businessman. You've been in business for most of your life. What advice would you give to a businessman who's preparing his business to bring his staff back and to open their doors on May 1st? What would you tell them to do, and how would you prioritize their actions over the next 10 days?
Well, as we found out in the last 70 days, the degree of risk in everything we do is much higher than it was before. Warren Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, who just turned 96, they asked him if they were going to deploy some of their capital. And he said, when you're in the middle of a hurricane, you just batten down the hatches and wait till you get on the edge of it before you start doing things. This is the middle of a hurricane. There is going to be risk, and everybody knows their customers. Every businessman or woman knows their customers better than anybody else. There will be some businesses as we do this open up and nobody shows up. My job is to make sure that your customers have confidence that they will show up and will continue to show up. The business's job is to do all they can to say we're practicing best practices. Your safety in our facility is our number one concern, and so there is going to be risk. I would love to flip the proverbial switch, but I don't know of one healthcare expert, one business expert, one pandemic expert, particularly as we learn more and more about the COVID-19 virus, that think that's going to happen, unless tomorrow a miracle vaccine showed up. Every single expert says that's at best maybe 11 months out, at worst probably 18. I read things every day. What's going to happen in between now and then are probably therapeutics, to where the number of people that are seriously afflicted, we'll be able to treat them better. Our testing will get better. We'll be able to do and we're starting that in Idaho, a self-swab test, maybe one you can do at home or one you can do at a facility, to where people will have a higher confidence. Again, we have to have the reagents, the swabs, the kits, the chemicals to do that. But there's a degree of risk going forward. My promise to all the people of Idaho, and particularly the businesses, is I'm going to try and give you the best possible information there is for you to make that decision. And you might look at if you're a restaurant. I think it's fair to say outside dining is going to. If the science that we know about humidity, temperature, ultraviolet light is anywhere close to what we think it is, I think your patrons are going to have a much higher confidence level outside than they are inside. Inside, what's your HVAC system? What's your spacing? What's your training of your health? But I fully understand that you need to have a heads up about when do I buy my groceries and when do I hire my staff. And my heart's with you, but this is not going to get real easy real fast.
Perfect. Thank you, Governor. I know you've got a meeting you've got to get to, so we're going to try and get you out of here real quick. I do want to thank you once again for coming today. On behalf of the Greater Idaho Falls Chamber of Commerce, the City Club, the Civitans, and our Rotary Club here in town, we are so grateful for all you're doing to try and keep Idaho safe and to help our businesses get back online. Any final parting shots you want to throw at us?
Other than this is, my heart breaks. Chip, you and the other good people in the Bonneville County area know that how excited I get when I come over and see an existing business grow, a new business be born or expand. This is not my dream position. This is doing the job that I was elected to do for you and all the people of the state of Idaho. I want to go back to ribbon cuttings and big celebrations and your members complaining about not having enough help.
Well, I'm with you on that, Governor. Thank you so much. On behalf of everybody here in East Idaho, we thank you for being willing to make tough decisions. While we may not all agree with them, we appreciate that you are thoughtful and that you are considerate of our communities. And we wish you the luck. We pray that you and Teresa are healthy.
Thanks, Jim.
Have a great day.